We record it and turns out the mic didn't work, or record it, turns out the laptop crashed, or one thing, what someone get like a car accident or whatever and broke? Was it Elliot whose computer got toast or whatever?
What?
Someone was telling me like they had like, it wasn't me, I wasn't there, but someone told me they got like a car accident or something. So I was like, all right, that took out one computer. All right, so this is a crash course into game design. As jokingly, when I was designing this, was like, hey, can you cram an entire semester of software engineering into 45 minutes? Probably not, but we're gonna kind of try. No, this does not count as course credit, although you can ask Dr. Bartz that Jonathan Track said, yes, it does. He won't remember me, it's fine. All right, nope, that button does not do that. Oh man, we don't have the nice presenter button. Yes, we do. All right, so here am I. So I'm Jonathan Track. I'm the co-founder and lead VR developer of Digital Precept, local VR development company. I'm also the primary VR developer at a certain shipping company that I can't really mention the name of, but they may or may not sponsor this entire building. If I mention that name, suddenly I am legally a spokesperson for the company, and that opens up a can of legal worms. My previous experience, I have 5 years in the corporate software development world, along with 2 years into kind of the video game development world. So. All right, so what I'm gonna talk about tonight, kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm gonna talk about some tools and philosophy that'll help you kind of design your projects and kind of what they're used to help you with, but I wanna give a big caveat to that. These are all tools, they're tools to help you, or as the saying goes, it's a rope to guide you, not a rope to hang you by. Don't be afraid to ditch a tool. Like if you're working with something, like hey, I'm trying to graph this out or chart it, and it just not helps you at all, like it just feels like you're wasting time, just ignore it, just move on. You know, you're probably gonna be like us, where you're a small team, you don't need to waste time. You're a small team, your focus should be being fast. You're not like a multi-million-dollar company. Let those guys worry about having 1,000 pages of schematics. However, the second caveat to that is, don't let pride refuse to let you bring that tool back in, because you'll probably be like, man, I don't need this. And then 2 weeks later, like, you know what, I really did need that tool actually. So don't let pride get in the way of that. Another thing is, you can always make your design better and perfect and add more polish. Don't. You're wasting your time at that point. Even the best software, I actually stole this quote, good designs are good enough. It's at the point where you start trying to make your design perfect, you could have already started working. So and no design will ever be perfect. So trying to get a perfect design, don't worry about it. One other thing I'll try to talk about at the end of this is also team management, AKA can we shove an MBA in here as well? The answer is no. So, but we're gonna talk about it because I find that coming from, my background is I have a double major, computer engineering, computer science, again, worked in industry 5 years, et cetera. No one really taught me in class or like on the work about team management skills. I had a little bit of that from being in the Boy Scouts, but everyone just either expects you to do A, hire an MBA that can do that, or B, figure it out on your own. So this is also like, hey, learn from my pain and mistakes, so that way you don't have to deal with as much, pain and suffering as my team has. All right, so again, with that big caveat, there's one thing, if you take nothing else in this lecture, just write this down. Scope creep is how projects die. You can now leave and go home. That's the most important fact of this entire lesson. So what scope creep is let's say you're making your game, you're going along, and it's working like, oh man, what if I made it where you press a button, the character backflips? Or what if we had it where you can do a live Twitch channel in-game? Or what if you start adding more feature to it? At the time, it was a good idea. The problem though is that that's how projects die because hey, you did the first feature, right? Well, I can do a second one. Well, I can do a third. You'll lead yourself down a rabbit hole and then you'll just never get things done. And I've seen that in big Fortune 500 companies and small teams. That is the death knell of projects. When your scope, the size of your project starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So how do you deal with that? The humble game design document. Like, it doesn't need to be fancy, it doesn't need to be expensive. I've seen templates online you can find, they're like 20 pages long, fill in the blanks. But a design document really only needs to answer 3 questions. The what? What is your game? And what I recommend is follow what they call the dive. Can you say your game, so you tell me about your game in 1 sentence. Nothing more, just 1 sentence. Once you can do that, then you're allowed to move on to tell me about your game in 1 paragraph. Then you can move on to tell me about your game in 1 page. Because everyone has their game idea in their head, and they could talk to you for hours and hours and pages, but it's like, if you can boil your game down to 1 sentence, like Halo, it's a sci-fi game that's a plot-driven shooter. Borderlands, it's a RPG type shooter that doesn't take itself seriously. Command & Conquer, it's a real-time strategy game pitting alternate universe World War II. I mean, that is that game in a nutshell. Great. If you can't describe your game in one sentence, then you need to kind of go back to the drawing board, because that might be a sign that you already have some scope creep going on. Your game's gotten too big and too bloated to be able to part it down. Hey, come on in. So once you can kind of have your description kind of down, that's when you want to move on to what features are going to be in your game. And you're going to follow that exact same format, unless this is my opinion. So, however, again, remember that caveat. If you start writing down pages of features, you're like, man, I could already be programming. Just start programming. But at least try to have a bullet point list. That way when all of a sudden oh, what if I had this feature? You'll be like, that wasn't on the list when I originally made it. Why didn't I put that on the list? Was it actually a good idea you forgot? Or maybe that's a sign that, hey, again, your scopes, maybe it might be creeping. So the next question is why? What makes your idea worth it? Now, I'm not saying that some games don't deserve to be made. Almost all ideas have some merit to them. But the why is going to kind of go back and refine the what and the how for you. And you don't have to answer these questions in this exact order. You can always jump around. So the reason why I say you need to ask yourself why. Why does this game deserve to be made? Well, for instance, if you're telling me, hey, I'm going to make Mario Kart, I'm going to make the next Mario Kart. Why? I mean, do you have some cool, unique idea how to do it? If it's just, hey, I just want to make a regular Mario Kart, nothing wrong with that, but just keep in mind, if you're going to invest 2-3 years of your time on this, Nintendo is probably already going to make 2 more Mario Karts. So I'm not saying you should not make the next Mario Kart, but maybe you should focus on a short project, 3-6 month turnaround. Now, if you have some crazy, cool, unique game, I'm gonna name drop. Anyone here ever played Left 4 Dead? It's a zombie game, came out in 2008. Now that's the thing. It's an old game. Came out. It's almost been almost 10 years. Came out in 2008. That's 10 years ago. That's like eternity in technology, right? Here's the thing, though. It was its own genre. It was a co-op horde game that focused on getting from point A to point B, and it was the only game in its genre, and nothing else ever really came out in that genre. And so then another game came out called Warhammer Vermintide. Everyone said, hey, wait a second. Isn't this basically Left 4 Dead? Well, yeah, but why should it be made? Because there hasn't been another game in that genre for 10 years. So they could we could take 4 or 5 years to make this because there's an audience that wants more of this thing that no one's feeding it. So your why really is, I'm not trying to say oh, your idea is terrible, but your why is definitely use that to gauge how much resources and time and effort you should put into this. And that kind of leads us to the last question, the how. That's where you get nitty gritty, and that's where so in my opinion, that might be the less important of the questions, because that's more of what platform are you going to use, what tools are you going to use, are you going to have a budget? You're like most of us, you're probably doing this as your hobby, so hey, just as long as you can afford rent, right? It's fine. What's your timeline? Are you going to take 20 years or 20 days? So that's the nitty gritty, and if I actually say if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Although I at least think about it, keep that in your mind. Because it's all fun and games until you say, oh, I gotta pay rent and I just dropped $400 on this fancy graphics engine. Don't do that. I mean, do it. Make sure you pay rent first, though. All right. So now we're gonna talk about what's called UML diagrams. And if any of y'all in the comp sci course, I'm sorry. If anyone have already taken it, I'm sorry again for giving you bad flashbacks. But what UML diagrams are a way of kind of modeling abstract thoughts and data. There's way over 30 of them. There's a whole site dedicated to it, and it's an international standard. Don't worry about it. There's a few I kind of picked out, and I think because they're a nice and easy way to kind of explain ideas. This one is called a structure diagram. I've also seen it called Handbook. And it's basically a way of let's sit down and kind of think about what my game needs and what that's going to resolve. So in this example, you have a game. Okay, well, my game's going to have graphics. All right, well, I'm going to graphics. That means I need an image for the player. I need image for background. I need image for that. Oh, the player has a gun, right? Well, that means I'm going to need sound. If that sound, I'm going to need a gun shooting sound or gun reloading sound. Or wait, they have bullets, right? Well, that means that they're going to have a level where they need to pick up bullets. This is a way to kind of just plot things out. What's up?
So how do we actually make these kind of diagrams?
I just use Microsoft Paint or Office. I mean, whatever is easy. I think there might be an official tool, but I actually just get a whiteboard and draw it out with a marker and take a picture. I just Google search because you won't be able to read my handwriting. So I just found where someone else made it, and I could just copy it. So another one, this is, again, very simple. It's a flow diagram. It's a way of kind of describing how things are going to work, like your systems. In this case, I took this, I wish I could remember the guy's name, but I took this one from his game where he had a trap. And you could see just, hey, there's a trap. Is it armed? Cool. Did the player touch it? All right, poke the spikes through the floor. You know, it just kind of flows through there. It's very obvious. And again, you might think that, hey, that was really simple and dumb. That's fine, cool. You might not do a flow diagram for something so simple, but if you're programming like an extremely complicated piece of code, like let's say it's an enemy that you're gonna have hunt through tall grass and figure out how to sneak around you, well, that might be really complicated. And that's why when you might want to say, all right, let's sit down with the team, kind of draw this out, see how we think this will work. Or you can just dive right in and code it. However, I tend to find that whenever I do that and don't bother trying to at least plot out, I always end up with a just massive spaghetti pile of code and end up just drawing it out anyway. So next one, finite state machine. I could just give this long description on what's different between a finite state machine and a flowchart. Finite's on the left, flowchart's on the right. Don't worry about it. However, what you see this one used a lot in academia is for artificial intelligence. The only difference between on the left here, which is the finite state machine, and the right, is that the right is usually part of the finite. The left one is, this is a state and there's an explicit action that happens. For example, you see this as S1, that might be, let's say you're your guard, and he's sitting idle, he's just chilling, whatever. Inside that state, you might have your flow chart where it's like, hey, have you been standing around for a while? Go find a chair. If you've been walking around for a while, maybe go check something out. And then an action occurs, and then your action might be, oh, an alarm's been raised. So now you're in state 2, searching. So then you might have a different flow chart that talks about how they search. There really, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter. The only time it will matter is when you take a test and your professor asks that question. So this is another one called a use case. And there's actually a site I found that was really nice called Green Door Games, where a guy actually plotted out an entire game design using diagrams. Again, we don't use use cases when I do it, although I do it with my day job occasionally. But a use case is, let's think about our game from the player's perspective. Because a lot of times, like I know we're pretty bad about it when we do game jams, which is, for anyone who's not ever gonna game jam, that's where you have 24 hours to make a game from scratch. We've coded everything up, we got all these cool features and stuff, but then we're like, all right, wait a second, how does the player play this? The player, there's no start menu? Does the game just end when this happens? Sometimes you gotta take like a step back and say, how is the player actually gonna see my game? And then you start thinking like, all right, well the player needs a title screen. The player is gonna have an exit screen, options. This is everything from the player's perspective. Making a video game is a lot like running a play. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes on. Moving props around, facing things toward the audience, hiding things from the audience. You could also spend a week of just background work that the player may never see, but in order to raise all your props around as if it were a stage. So, and again, big caveat, if you don't like a tool and you feel like it's wasting your time, just ditch it. You're a small team. The big AAA companies are the ones that have to worry about, oh, we have millions of dollars of assets in this. They have to plan. They're like the big tanker ship. They're trying to get across AAA ocean. You're a small team, you're a speedboat. You're just worry about getting across Indy Lake, So, working as a team. So, as I say, can we cram an MBA in here? No. Am I qualified to teach an MBA? Probably not. That guy is, but you can ask him. So this is a few things I've just noticed from my years of just working with different teams at my day job, working at the side job, the video game, stuff that I wish people had taught me, and stuff we kind of had to learn on our own and do some research, and probably should have gone through an MBA with the level of research we had to do. So one thing is it's called fail fast. So you're a small team, it's more important you just to try stuff. It's just experiment. Just say, hey, literally by the time I gave you this lecture, maybe you could have sat down in 1 hour, prototype some, hey, I made this thing where this block does something when I press this button. Try it out and tell me what you think. People say, hey, that's really good. Cool, maybe that was a good idea, you should keep going. Or hey, that was awful. All right, we'll stop, try something different. There's nothing wrong with failing. The master has failed 10,000 times, whereas the student has only failed once. What's up?
But what if you really like that one thing and but your audience somehow,
Doesn't like it?
yes.
Yeah, just ask your audience then. It's like, hey, so you don't like my idea, but why didn't you like it? Because maybe it was like, it could be something different. Like, for instance, let's say it was like a driving game and you had like a boost mechanic. And we'd be like, hey, I don't like that boost mechanic. Well, why didn't you like it? They might find some reason like you didn't think about, like, oh, the boost isn't fast enough or it's too slow. You see what I mean? Just ask for more information. Then, hey, try again, make a second attempt at it. Give that a couple times, just do it, I would say, a handful of times. But again, if you keep just getting negative feedback all the time, it might just be an idea you need to set aside. Because everyone's gonna have ideas where it's a great idea for you, but it might not be a great idea for other people. So unless you're gonna somehow buy your own game 1,000 times, or you're gonna be completely happy with being the only person who plays your game, you do have to sometimes water things down or change things for the audience. So don't ever consider it like a personal attack on you. Just remember, it's just, hey, it's a great idea for you, might not be a great idea for other people.
Well, I know some game developers who literally dish out personal attacks instead of taking your advice.
Yeah, it's again, it kind of goes back to that first thing I said, just don't let pride get in the way. I mean, I've been there. It's like you've worked for 2 weeks on this one idea and people are like, dude, that's awful. I'm like, okay. So other thing, try somehow get feedback. There's a phrase I hear a lot in the audio community that says kill your babies. And it kind of goes to the idea of like, you worked for 2 weeks on this idea, you think it's the best perfect thing in the world, but everyone says it's bad. Maybe you should just put it on the shelf. Because you do kind of get that like parent syndrome where you think your kid is perfect and it turns out, maybe they're not. So again, don't let pride get in the way. You're not like a multi-million-dollar company. We can't throw millions of dollars at a problem. So managing a team. My experience, managers are completely useless until you have to be a manager.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, people laughing understand what I'm getting at. They've been on the other side of that table. So a lot of people, I hear like our anecdotes for people in Silicon Valley at these startup companies, they're all programmers, like, oh, we don't need managers. And then they'll start getting on and, oh, why didn't that feature get done? Oh, I forgot. Oh, who was supposed to talk to that person? I don't remember. Managers are like multipliers for your team. Like your manager is the person that helps your team work. It's like trying to have a car without an axle if you don't have a manager. Now, if you're really small enough, what we do is like someone on your team becomes the manager. Now, there might also be a programmer on the side, but their main job first and foremost is to manage the team. They're the one that's going to be talking to everyone on the team, making sure that they get status updates, things don't get dropped by the wayside. However, having been in that role, it's like you think that you can do both. Like, oh, I can program this and manage the team. No, you can't. You're going to either need to be a programmer or be a manager or be an artist. You can't do both. A manager is being a full-time job. And you can still, on the side, still, hey, I can be the backup programmer or the backup artist or the backup designer. But just keep in mind, like everyone goes into the same thing. They think like, oh yeah, manager, easy. No, it's not. Other things, agile development. If you were around in programming computer science like 10 years ago, that was like the bee's knees, man. It was everything. Everyone kept talking about it. It was great. Anyone who then worked in like a big company that used Agile learned, no, it wasn't the greatest thing ever. The problem I see, what I had with big companies is that they would use it to micromanage your team. Now, there's entire companies that whole existence is that you pay them to train you to do Agile development. All you need to do, just from the takeaway, is, hey, have like a daily meeting or a weekly meeting, and then just take your project, break it into chunks, all right? How big is that chunk? Just keep breaking it. Break it up until you have so many little chunks that are all just like, 1 hour to 2 hour tasks. And that way then you have your manager, again, you need a manager, or at least someone who can do that role, to start kind of organizing like, all right, hey, you're working on the UI buttons. I'll see you tomorrow if you have it done or not. Oh, hey, you're over here, you're gonna work on, you said you were gonna work on the driving mechanics? Great, that's probably gonna take you about 4 or 5 days, all right? And that's your job. It's a way to help organize. That's why I had that quote, use it for good, not for evil. I can't say the fun words that my day job company uses for it because then that would be revealing who I worked for. But it is kind of infamous. Team composition is another weird thing. There's really, like, unless again you're $1 million company that can selectively hire people, You're basically going to get a collective of people that want to work together, and then you're just going to have to deal with it. I was once told that you need to shoot for a 3-to-1 artist to programmer ratio, and I completely blew it off and thought that was stupid. And no, I completely agree with it. But you don't have that option. I mean, you might, unless you get like a grant or investor fund or something. You just really need to recognize how efficient your team members are and what their job roles are, and then figure out how to time scale around that. That team, when I talked to them, they came to the point as like, the time it took like an artist to make a model, their programmer had made code that could work for like 30% of the game. That wasn't saying their artist was slow, it was just saying that's just the nature of the beast. You made a shirt that would go on one character in your game, that guy made the code that would make all the characters in the game walk. And so that's why they're saying, well, you just need more artists. Throw more artists at the problem. And in my opinion, you don't have to. It's a good idea because that's a more balanced team in my opinion, but I've come up with a couple different ways over the years of like kind of balancing. I mean, these are my recommendations based on experience, so don't take this as the gold standard. So currently my team at Digital Precept, we're programmer heavy. Majority of we have like 1 artist, 1 designer, and 2 programmers. That's a small team, yes, but that's really heavy on the programmer side. So what we do is called a tool-oriented development. And what that is we design all of our code as tools for our artist and designer to use to use their time efficiently. So like our goal is when our level designer sits down to make a level, he never needs to touch code. He doesn't need to touch art. We gave him the tools to do all that. And our artist, when he's working on clothing and whatnot, we have tools for him. That way, he doesn't need to do touch code or mess with Unity imports or anything. Because we're programmer heavy, we have the extra manpower in that regard to spare. Designer heavy, this is how at my day job for like 3 years what we were. I was on a team and the app that we had to run was 2 programmers, 2 business analysts, a systems architect, and then a host of system requirement writers. I think there was about 4 of them. So yeah, think about that, that's like an upside down pyramid. However, our business analysts and architect were really good about their job. So essentially I would like come in on a Monday and they basically had fleshed out everything to the point like, here's an instruction guide on how to program what you need to do. Made my job easy. So that's why I say here, you basically just flesh everything out as much as possible. That's what they did. They did the legwork. They would go talk to the other teams and say, hey, your programming team's doing X, Y, and Z. All right, that means our team needs to do A, B, and C. And like, all right, well, what happens if this problem occurs? So I'd have a question and be like, what happens if we get my system, because I can't mention where I work, said, gets a bad file, and they said, well, hey, just flip to page 20, and here's all the stuff you need to do. Great. So going on the last one, the artist heavy, I would jokingly say just hire more programmers, because I've never had the luxury to be on that artist team, so I do some research on other teams that were like that, and how they did it. So I can't say it from personal experience, but their recommendations were focus on your asset creation as more of a building block perspective, like make Legos, not dioramas. So like if you're building like a sci-fi level, instead of your artist team making these big grandiose hallways and space stations, instead make doors, make floor panels, make little like pieces. That way when your programmer and designer get there, they can fit things together how they want, and then your artist can go back later and say, all right, we're gonna custom make this part, we're gonna smooth these together. They can go through and give that final finish. So those are my design methodology recommendations. Again, that's my recommendations. That's not the gold standard. That's just 5 years of experience of messing around. Again, the huge caveat is if it doesn't work for your team, don't try to force it and make it work. You need to figure out what your team is efficient at and what your team is good at. And remember, it's a rope to guide you, not to hang you. So that is actually my last slide. So yeah, we crash course that in about 30 minutes. We still have 15 minutes to shove an MBA in there, John, if you want now.
I can bore you all with that, but again, my background from that's programming and accounting, so
you're perfect.
I'm trying to the numbers all day long, but that, as I said, that's like crushing puppies. Because the programmers have a passion, and I am one in the daytime. We have a passion for what we do, what we enjoy, we find fun and intellectual fulfillment. But when you have to monetize and put a financial figure on that passion,
that's when the evil accountant comes out, right?
Well, that's where one of your slides kicked in earlier to say about kill babies. You have to be willing to go, okay, I'm doing this because this is a passion project, and realize it's going to be a bottomless pit. Or you have to go, maybe I want to get compensation for this. and then you have to plan accordingly. So I can definitely try and put together 10 minutes of how to manage the business side. But a lot of stuff you covered in your previous lecture, where you went to PAC South and you ran into stuff just like marketing material. And again, that may not go into the design, but it kind of dovetails into it in that we're all thinking about the game, and then you almost forget about the whole branding part of it.
Oh yeah, there's a whole business aspect.
Yeah, how are you getting your game to people? It goes back to his question and your answer. What if my customers don't like it? Well, one, who's going to pay you? And if that doesn't matter, then your customer, you can make a fortress. It doesn't matter. You're not making money. But if you do, then that becomes its own issue. And that, again, that doesn't go into design, but as you said, if your artist is worried about stuff on the level design, chances are you now have a color scheme that goes into like a title design.
It's kind of like the...
Sitting there back to square one going, how do you sell this?
It's kind of like the Flappy Bird guys, who I think they said their first 50 games were complete failures, and it was their 51st game that was the wild branch-out multi-billion-dollar success. Or is the guy who made Flappy Bird, and that's the one that I always get angry about. He didn't make that game to make a game. He was literally just following a tutorial online. He literally there was a tutorial on how to make Flappy Bird. He's like, all right, and I made Flappy Bird. And then whatever reasons, everyone liked it. And even he says, yeah, I just won the lottery. I don't know why people bought my game. So sometimes don't look at like games like Minecraft and Flappy Bird and say, oh, we need to figure out what they did. Every single one of them said, I just won the lottery. I don't know why. But
I think going back to interject one more thing, your manager comment, I know I laughed out loud because I'm 12 months into that myself, and I'm used to people always roadblocking me. I'm used to managers, no, we can't pay for it, it's not a big deal. And then when you find yourself on the other side having to walk that fine rope of, okay, we will spend this precious dollar, but you gotta sell me that this is a good idea. And I'm not doing it because I'm greedy. It's like, I only got so many dollars.
yeah,
And so
I had the exact same experience.
It is such a weird experience, especially since I went 10 years in private industry, never got a whiff of project management. And then you find yourself on the other side and you have like, I kind of liken it to newborn parents who have kids for the first time. You go through it, you have the kid gets home, and you just kind of sit down and you go, I have no idea what I'm doing. I read books, it doesn't help. I've talked to my parents, it doesn't help. I drink, it doesn't help. I mean, project management is very much like that because you know how it works in your head, but the managing personalities and managing the people becomes just as much of the dynamic as you managing the technology and the math. And it's very eye-opening to get on the other side of that and go, they expect me to know how to do that recursive agile part. I don't know how to do that. Or people tell me how to do it, and it still doesn't help because you're like, I have monolithic code. It's not object-oriented. So do we refactor? How do we do this?
All right, now John and I could share war stories with you guys all night long about here's all the horrors. What's questions? What's up?
You said this would be very convenient or handy for young middle school.
Yeah. I know I went kind of more college level on there. Sorry. I'm used to being like a classroom of 30 college students.
That's why. So you need to be careful what you advertise.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm used to having all college students, and I was like, oh, I'll be college. I can do a college level.
No, do it just a minute for 8th graders or 7th graders.
Yeah. So to boil this down.
Like how do you
do what?
do the Lego? Make a little tiny Lego.
For that stuff, I don't want to get into a whole class on 3D modeling, but this was supposed to be more oriented on hey, this is kind of how you manage your team and work with other people. So that's why I know a lot of this is very abstract. What's up?
Will you have is this just one of many meetings?
Yes,
the other
and
meetings you'll focus on.
Yes, every meeting is completely different.
So it's just this one.
So yeah, so we can do art 3D models next time. Sometimes we do programming. This was, I'm sorry that you guys came to design class. That was probably a bit too onto the deep end. But to break it down to to a low level, a middle school, high school level, the key points I would say is when you're going to make a game, write down just a list of what you want to have in your game, and then just stick to that list. Don't add things to it, because that's what you're going to get older, and then you're going to get arrogant and think that you're smart, and it turns out no, you're not as smart as you think you are. Don't make my mistakes. So that's if you take one thing, that's what I would say. And everything else in this was just kind of tools to help you, like diagram and plot and just talk about managing a team. But if you take one thing, just write down your game idea, don't change it. So.
That's a good idea.
So.
Can you give an example, like a design document? Do you have one you can pull up? Game?
There is the one.
I don't know if I can get access to any of mine. Actually,
There's the one in the Google Drive.
Actually, if I can log into my Google account, I can show you for the game that we're currently working on. We're going to sell in like 6 months.
Sure. Okay, so the diagram.
Oh, I don't have any diagrams right like that.
Well, I'm just saying that kind of thing. If you could walk through it, even if you don't have one, just walk through like, okay, I've got this character. I need it to move left and right.
Sure. Oh, you mean like walk through a diagram? Yeah. Sure. I'll do it on the whiteboard because I'm really bad at Microsoft Paint on the laptop. Yeah.
Hey, Shrek.
What's up?
Before we dig into that, weren't we gonna have like a intro to Unity kind of thing?
Yeah, we're
doing there in April.
Yeah, we're supposed to. The next class will be like an intro to making games, like the actual making the Legos, making the code, and that is fully beginner's perspective.
And also the Ludadara one?
Yep, that's. So, let's do this. It is, I know. I actually drew it right before class and pulled the projector down. So, all right. So someone name a game that's popular and we'll kind of walk through like a diagram for it.
Breath of the Wild.
No, I'm gonna do Pac-Man.
It was good enough for me in 1982.
Blue marker?
Good
Sure.
enough for y'all now. Gosh darn it.
I was raised, I probably couldn't remember this.
Oh, trust me. I know.
But if that's
By the time I get to your age,
Yeah.
still
All right.
probably on a Switch or something.
I'm just saying. I played on Atari XL 5600 XL.
So who can describe Pac-Man to me in one sentence? Beeps don't count. So Pac-Man is a maze game in which you must collect all the points to win.
You have to collect all the things while running away from them.
So we're gonna say a maze. I'm gonna do shorthand where you collect the points.
You collect all the things.
Where you collect all points. All right. There you go. That is your game in a nutshell. That's Pac-Man. And if I'm a really slow writer, but if we were going to do it in a paragraph, Pac-Man, it's a game where you run around a maze, collect points. While you're in the maze, you're dodging ghosts and trying to collect power-ups that push up. That's that game in a paragraph. And we could sit here and talk for like a page, but let's move on to what Steven said, the diagrams. So let's focus at it from the player's perspective. All right, so I got my player. And to me, it always laughs, like if you actually can find an official $1 million company's documents, they use stick figures in them.
Can you just draw Pac-Man?
I'm afraid to now. Let's see if I can do it. Got an underbite. It's underbite Pac-Man. It's Pac-Man's like knockoff clone. So, there you go.
He's angry.
So, old timers, I know you all played Pac-Man. No, I'm right there with you. I played Pac-Man. So, what's the player do? Well, player puts in a coin, right? And then what's they do? They move Pac-Man around.
4 directions.
We just lumped that into move Pac-Man. So you could, like I've seen documents where they break that down, but that kind of gets to the point of like, why bother? That gets really complicated and you're kind of just wasting time, in my opinion. If you want to do that, go for it, by all means. So you move back, and then what happens when you die? You could put in another coin.
If you have a life.
Well, the player doesn't do that though, the game does that.
Oh.
So as a player, I could either put in coins for when I die, and I can move Pac-Man, and that's all I can do as a player. So if this is our game, pretend that's a G. Player does these two things. And then on the other side of that, we have, the computer. And what they're going to do is be like, all right, well, they move ghosts. The computer does that. I'm going to put C for computer. And then what else do? They spawn power-ups, right? Spawn power-ups, do power, and they change levels. So once the player beats the level, you go to the next one. The player doesn't do anything. So right now, we have the two things our player does, which is put a coin in, move Pac-Man. So what does that tell us? We only need two things. Somehow to move the Pac-Man, we'll say a joystick, and something to put a coin in, let's just say a button. There you go, you have your user interface. There's no start screen, there's no options or anything. It's just, hey, it's what you do. So, I realize I jumped the gun a little bit on here. I should have talked about our features, but that is basically our features. You move Pac-Man around. Ghost spawn, those are controlled by the computer. Power-up spawn, controlled by the computer. And the computer changes the level.
Well, you can talk about like, okay, so if you don't have a power up, the ghost can kill you. If you have a power up, you can kill the ghost. Right?
Yeah, but that's still controlled by moving Pac-Man.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. You want to try to keep things as simple as possible. I mean, we could say, hey, you have to push a button to kill a ghost. But then that kind of gets back to your design thing. It's like, do I want the players to have to manage that, or is it just running into the ghost good enough? So in this case, I'd say, no, let's just keep it simple. To give an example, like what I kind of said for like the flowchart stuff, who here knows the trick how to cheat the ghosts in Pac-Man? So every colored ghost in Pac-Man, do you know the trick?
Sit up, down.
You know the trick that you can fake out the pink ghost? So every colored ghost has a different strategy. It follows its own different flowchart. And so this is where we're going to do a flowchart. We'll say the red ghost. So this little dot represents when it's alive. It gets a happy face. So what does it do? What does it do when it's alive? It looks at Pac-Man.
By alive, you mean undead?
I mean, it's not been eaten. It looks at Pac-Man. And then what it does is it says, okay, the way the red ghost in Pac-Man works, it says it always tries to get 5 feet in front of Pac-Man. It doesn't try to chase him, it says go for 5 feet in front of. That's why if you play Pac-Man, it always seems to come around the corner at you, because that was its goal. So it's going to say, hey, look at Pac-Man, and then move to, let's see, 5 feet in front. And then it's going to do that. Now the only catch is there's going to be a little branch that says, is there a power-up? Because remember, if Pac-Man eats a power-up, the ghost can get killed. And what happens is they run away. So as they look at Pac-Man, does he have a power-up? Run. Because now you're panicking. If he doesn't have a power-up, try to get to him. And then this just keeps going back. He just keeps running away until that power up. Yes, no, no. All right, go find Pac-Man. And that's it. That's the flowchart for red. So then we let's talk about the other ghosts. They're all more or less the same. This is really the only step that changes. The blue ghost, I believe, it doesn't actually try to move to Pac-Man. It just moves randomly. The yellow ghost would always try to follow Pac-Man. So just look at Pac-Man, move to Pac-Man. The catch is the pink ghost is the one you can fake out. It would always try to move to, I believe it's actually 10 feet in front of Pac-Man. That way it would look like the pink ghost and the red ghost were ganging up on you. The problem is that if you go straight at the pink ghost, if this is Pac-Man, the pink ghost is here, all of a sudden it hits here and says, hey, wait, I'm supposed to be 10 feet in front of. That means I need to go that way, and it starts running the wrong direction. And so because the programmers didn't plan this out, they didn't think about that. I could say that maybe they planned it out, who knows. But that's the infamous trick in Pac-Man, is that's how you could fake out the ghost. Basically, you would charge at the ghost, and instead the ghost would stop, go, uh-oh, wrong way, because it would get here. What they needed to do to fix that would be to add a second little option here. And this option is it close? Is Pac-Man close enough? If so, move right to him. Because otherwise, if you're right in front of Pac-Man, you just touch Pac-Man, you win, right? However, why would you move 10 feet away? Because then you'd be running away. So if you were plotting out your game, you made your little flowchart, that's the kind of things you got to keep an eye out for. Like, what, if I'm always going to be doing this, when could that mess me up? So, and I would say that like that's the golden trick. No, I make flowcharts for games and stuff, and we always find new little hiccups here and there. However, after you make enough mistakes, eventually you start remembering what old mistakes you made. So, Steven, is there any other diagrams I miss? No? The state machine is very similar to it. It would literally just be this, just shaped differently. That's that in a nutshell. Yeah, no problem. Anyone else have any questions or suggestions or whatnot? All right, cool. All right, so did we say our next lecture is going to be the Intro to Game Development?
Yes.
Cool.
April
Yeah, read 'em there.
6th, 9th?
So April, I trusted you, John.
Oh, sorry. I'll Facebook it.
Yeah.
How do you convince artists to work